What I aim to do in this chapter and in the next chapter is kind of give us a economic framework that we can then approach the rest of the chapters. I mean, the idea is that you've all had to take econ to get enrolled in this course. That was one of the prerequisites. But for some of you, you may have taken it a long time ago. For others of you, maybe you just had a very bad experience with it and you choose not to remember it. Um, right? Or that you just, learned at a different institution, person wasn't very good. I don't know what the reason is, but let's just get us all on the same page. Um, and just start with a first chapter that's just going to kind of review for us the basics of economics. So, economics. So, the idea is that you're going to read the chapter. The chapter is pretty short, but it's not obviously me discussing it. The point here is that we're going to spend these lectures then actually talking about it and, me kind of sharing my thoughts about um, well, there had to be a reason why I'm asking you to read it and why I think that it is going to be important. So let's go with that. Okay, so economics as a discipline. Um, sorry, I'm just also opening this. Um, 1 second. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, so the idea with um, the idea with the discipline of economics is that it's sometimes got a weird or strange placement because it is a social science, yet oftentimes the primary individuals that take it are business students. So really the first question is, how do we understand um, this discipline? Well, the very simple way to think about it is that economics very simply is the science of scarcity. Scarcity is what defines the economic problems that exist. It is scarcity that um, it is scarcity that um, is where we see the tension in society, and and it is scarcity where we critique society and how it's designed and what it tries to do. It's scarcity that drives the economic decision making process. So, with that said, um, let's just skip over this outline here. That's what we get right here in this first definition, that economics is the study of the allocation and use of scarce resources. So, in other words, that we have unlimited wants and needs, and limited resources to meet those needs. Right? And the question that economics has to come up with some answer for is that right there. Which of these wants and needs will be met? And for whom? Who is going to get the things that are produced? Economics needs to have some sort of framework to be able to do these things. Now, we haven't gotten to opportunity cost yet. We're going to get to that though. And what is becomes important for understanding that scarcity is this idea of the opportunity cost. What did we give up to do something else instead? That's the easiest way of understanding opportunity cost. What what did we give up to do something else instead? Um, Let me try to explain this in two different ways. One way to understand opportunity cost is that line, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Economists love that line, and they especially use it when they are going out to lunch. This line inevitably comes up. But um, the idea is that um, even if someone is paying the bill, that um, you could have been doing something else with your time. And um, what it also sort of um, makes us recognize is that as our lives change, the opportunity costs change. Right? For me, right now, if I were to compare my life now than when it was 15 years ago, 15 years ago, I had a cat, and that was it. That was about my only responsibility in this world, which meant, right? I did like bar trivia and, just in general lived a pretty self centered life. And, I could spend hours having a meal. I could, just hang out with people and do nothing and work quite a bit too. Now, becoming more responsible, more mature, now I'm married, I have three children. My life is different. And it's important to recognize that it's different because it shapes then what my opportunity costs are. Right? Let's redefine what it means to be you know, what if I were a bad parent? What would it mean if I were a bad parent? It could mean me saying, to my children, sorry, I can't help you with homework, or sorry, I can't, make you something to eat. I want to go to the bar and play bar trivia. The opportunity cost of playing that bar trivia is incredibly high, as I see it. Because what it means is that either my kid is starving or is lacking that interaction with me. And that's pretty big. That's pretty serious. Um, the other side of it too, right, is that parents, especially when they're just beginning off, they get a less sleep because the idea is that yeah, they'd really like an extra hour of sleep, but the opportunity cost, with that opportunity cost being good care of their children, that opportunity cost is really high, so they give up some sleep to keep doing something good for them. What we're trying to say here in this whole slide is that when choices are made, the opportunity cost needs to be taken into account. Now, this is just for individuals. Businesses face the same thing, right? And governments also do as well, right? The government's only got so much money. If it invests more in education, then it must invest less in something else. For a business, if it decides to produce one type of product, then that means it can't produce some other kind of product. Even though there's no explicit money changing hands, the cost here is implicit. not explicit. So even though there is a cost that's implicit, you need to take it into account. And if you fail to, well, then the problem is going to be that the problem then is going to be that you could make the wrong decision. Okay, so we start to understand opportunity cost if we want to model it. If we want to try to model it, the opportunity cost, we do it with what's called a production possibilities frontier, the PPF. And what this model is going to show is it's going to show us the amount of resources we have and what we can produce. So I'm going to create a new slide here. I know they're going to start to do it here. I can see that they're going to start to draw it, but let me draw it out for you live. Let's insert a new slide. Let's just make it blank. Yeah, whatever. Okay. Unsupported placeholder. So the idea is that we're going to have an XY space, this being the x-axis, this being the y-axis. Quantity of good number one, quantity of good number two. So we've got two different products, good one and good two. And then on the side here, we have a certain amount of workers, we have a certain amount of land, we have a certain amount of capital, capital being buildings, machines, equipment. We have all of these resources, which, as we said in the very beginning, are limited. But the country has these resources, right? So let's just make it the USA. USA, USA. So the USA has, right, 300 million people, which works out to be about 150 million or so workers. We have, right, a certain amount of square miles, so land, and we have a certain amount of buildings and machines. And if we devoted all of the resources of our country to producing just good one, maybe that's how much we would produce. And if we devoted all of our resources to just producing good two, maybe that's what we would produce. Right? There's some sort of production equation that would tell us how these resources are converted to the outputs. The outputs being good one and good two. And then we could imagine that if the decision was made to make both of the goods, maybe this would be a possibility, maybe this would be a possibility, and maybe this would be a possibility. These are just some possible places. Now, let's connect the dots. Just kind of making this a very broad line here, connecting them. These are all the possibilities. So that's why we would call it Production Possibilities Frontier, or PPF. Now, as a frontier, right? So the first two parts of this phrase should now be obvious, right? We're talking about the production of these two goods. We're talking about all the different possibilities, right? These were all different possibilities. A, B, C, D, and E. But it's also a frontier. And what that means is that you can't go beyond it. So it could actually be below it, but I can't be beyond it. I can't be beyond it because I don't have the resources to get that. G is just not possible. But F is possible. F represents me being inefficient. So maybe I have some unemployed workers, or maybe some capital equipment that's not being used. Something's going on. And if I could get that worker to start working, it'd be possible to get more of good two without giving up good one, more of good one without giving up good two, or more of both. Now that's important, so let me repeat it again. Point F here, which is below the frontier, represents an inefficiency. And the way that we know that it's inefficient is because I have three different possible scenarios. If I were able to get, let's say, this unemployed worker to start working, that the person could, or that the country could, have more of good two without giving up good one, more of good one without giving up good two, or more of both. What that also implies is that once you're on the line, all of these points are efficient. So points below the line are inefficient. Points on the line are efficient. All of these points, the A, B, C, D, E. Because what that represents, let's just add another slide here. What that represents let's just pick two middle points here, A and B. Let's put them right here. That if I want to move from A to B, I've got to give up good two to get good one. I got to give up one thing to get another. That right there, that measurement is the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is the measurement of that sacrifice. To produce more of good one and be at point B, you have to give up the production of quantity two, of good two. Okay, so let's go on here with the actual slides. Well, they picked an example here for you. They picked soda and pizza. How original. Well, what you can see is these are all the different possibilities given the resources that exist. So hopefully this makes a little bit more sense. Given the resources, these are all the production points. And then we can connect those points with this line right here. That is now our PPF, our production possibilities frontier. Points beyond the frontier, such as this point and this point, are impossible. Points here are possible, but inefficient. And points here are possible and efficient. And how do we know that something is efficient? Because there's an opportunity cost that exists. To go from Y to M requires giving up soda to get more pizza. That is what makes it efficient. Whereas, if you're at this point here, it's possible to get more soda without giving up pizza. It's possible to get more pizza without giving up soda. Or it's possible to get more of both. There is no, in some sense, there is no opportunity cost at that point, because all you need to do is get your inefficient resources starting to be used. And there we just see that right here in a slightly different picture. And you see this again right here as well. Now, the lines we've been drawing up to now have been straight line production possibility frontiers. But it turns out that they don't always look like that. That instead, it's possible to have a PPF that's a straight line, and it's possible to have one where it's bowed outwards. In fact, when it's bowed outwards, that's actually the most realistic and frequent kind of production possibilities frontier you would see. This one you're seeing increasing opportunity costs. This one you're seeing constant opportunity costs. How do we see this increasing opportunity cost, just in case it's not obvious to you? As we go from left to right, so as we produce more of Q1, I have to give up increased amounts of good number one. Look at what good number two. Just to get a very small increase in good one, that little increase right there. I had to give a pretty large amount of good too. And why is that? The simple answer, and the reason why this is the more realistic reason why, is that we're seeing a mismatch of resources. Resources tend to be designed really well to doing one thing. And this is what we're seeing here. The example, the best example I can give you is I was once asked, back in the days when I was single, um, I was asked to take care of a plant. Now, I'd never taken care of a plant. I've never owned a plant. Um, and I think I'd just forgotten to water it for like a week, maybe 2 weeks. And then the friend was coming back. And I was like, ah, shit. Like, I can't just give my friend, what am I going to do? Just give him the dead plant back? You can't really do that. Um, So I was like, I'll give it Gatorade because I thought, like when you're like an athlete and you're like really sweating and you're like didn't get water and you're losing your electrolytes, that Gatorade, right, with its electrolytes is the best thing to drink, better than water. So I gave it Gatorade, and then the plant really died. I say that story because it highlights the fact that I don't know very much about growing stuff. But I don't know. I mean, I think I'm okay at teaching classes. On the other hand, there's a farmer out there who probably knows a lot about taking care of plants, but doesn't have the mannerisms or management skills needed to run a classroom. So it's not saying that, if we're really desperate and we want to grow a lot of plants, that maybe I should be forced to start to grow plants. It's just that what we're saying is that you lose a lot of college courses that could be taught once you ask me to start growing things. And it goes the other way too, right? You give up a lot of food, a lot of plants once you ask that farmer guy to start teaching. And he's not going to do it that well. He or she's not going to do it that well. That mismatch of resources is much more commonplace. On the other side here, constant opportunity costs. Here we're just saying that individuals are and resources are equally matched to producing both resources. And in reality, that's just not generally speaking true. So then we have economic growth. Economic growth can be understood through these production possibilities frontiers. And what it does is it can be represented as shifting the frontier. That economic growth can come from having more resources, but it can also come from using resources better, meaning in some way the technology gets better and it helps shift um, the growth more. And that's what we see here. And that there's two different ways of understanding it. Is that the way that it's affected could affect both. So it could be a parallel shift, meaning it shifts the whole curve. Or we could think that the resource really only helps for the most part with just one of the goods. So if we take over a country and we get their land, that's going to help me make more plants, but it's probably not going to help me teach more college classes. At the same time, if we get like broadband internet and now I can like stream my classes to more students, that's going to mean I can produce more college classes, but not necessarily grow more plants. Whereas here, if I just get more workers, well, now I can make more college classes and I can grow more plants. So we can see that specialized growth and generalized growth in those kinds of examples. And that's, again, our two reasons. Either more resources, like if we just take over a country, or we just uncover a different way to extract the resources, or those the way that there's a process that we use to combine the resources to produce the final output good. If we become better at combining the resources to produce the output good, then that right there is going to represent for us an ability to grow um, the production capabilities of the country more. Okay. We see this here. I'm just going to jump to the actual model, and then you can kind of just read these slides here. So this is known as the circular flow model. It's the economist way of understanding how markets exist. Because for economists, markets are incredibly important. What this means for us is that we have three different entities in the economy. We have the government, we have households, and we have firms. These three groups interact with each other in two markets: the goods and services market and in the factor market. And what you're seeing with all these arrows is then those interaction processes between the firms and the households and the government. Right? So the government has to be supported by firms and by households. So it's getting tax money from those two entities, right? And you can see those flows right here and here. And then the government is giving them services. So that's understanding what's happening here horizontally. And also, the government buys goods and services, and it buys different resources. So that's understanding what's going on vertically here, that the government does buy these things in these markets. So now we understand the cross. Now what about the shape of the X itself, or the square itself? So to understand the square itself, that's where households sell their labor services and they get wages. Households sell different resources and they're paid prices for those resources. And then households buy goods and services that firms produce. That's our circular flow diagram. Now, just making sure we're all good here. Now, the other thing to add to this is, how do economists understand the decision making process that individuals go through? Let me just talk about just making sure what I want to talk about here. Okay. The biggest way to understand how economists make decisions, we already said kind of what's going on there, is opportunity cost. But then also marginal benefits and marginal costs need to be compared as well. Where marginal benefit is the incremental benefit that comes from doing something one more time. And the marginal cost is the incremental cost to doing something one more time. Now, if you've had me for principles, you've heard this story before, but I'm going to tell it again because I think it illustrates this well. So every year, I make a bad decision. Um, that bad decision I make every year is that I eat the number of pieces of sushi as I am years of age. So I just turned 44. And so that would mean that in one sitting, I aim to eat 44 pieces of sushi. Now, some of you can already see that's problematic because that's a lot of sushi to eat in one sitting. But how would we understand that economically? So, I try to starve myself enough, not too much, but you try to starve yourself enough so that you can eat all of this sushi. And the very first piece you eat of the sushi, you're really hungry. So you tastes pretty darn good. Even the second piece is pretty good. Not as good as the first, but it's pretty good. Not as good as the first, but pretty good. And then the third piece, even a little bit less additional goodness, but still pretty good. Now, what happens if you've ever eaten this amount of sushi is that by about piece 20 or 25, your stomach's feeling pretty full. And by the 30s, you're feeling like you're going to throw up. And as you approach the 40s, you're like drinking Sprite and you're just like taking a break and you're breathing really heavy and you're saying, I'm never going to do this ever again. But you still do. And hopefully you get to number 44 without throwing up. Once you're throwing up, the cost is pretty high, right? Even just, you can be so full your stomach hurts. That's a pretty high marginal cost. The idea is that as the quantity is going up, the marginal benefit is falling. The additional benefit is falling. Let's stay at the first one. Let's do this here. At quantity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Marginal benefit, marginal cost. Let's just say I, pay, I don't know, $1 a piece of sushi. It's a bit much, but I'm just going to write it out here. That very first piece of sushi gave me 5 units of happiness. So economists call these UTLs to stand for units of happiness. And then the second piece gives me a little bit less. The third piece, a little bit less. The fourth piece, a little bit less. And the fifth piece, even less than that. And so you can see the marginal benefits are declining. The marginal costs are increasing, and they're increasing. So these are going down because I'm getting less and less happiness out of the good, right? It's just not doing it for me as much. So there's a diminishing marginal benefit, but the marginal cost is going up. And the marginal cost is going up because not only am I buying the sushi, but now it's making my tummy hurt. The problem, as I've described it, is that at 44, the problem is that the marginal benefit is negative. That's how bad it is. Because I'm like, sitting in the parking lot of a grocery store and I just look like a real dummy, right? So the marginal benefit is really, really low, and the marginal cost is really high, right? Because it's not healthy to be eating that much. So the marginal cost is much, much higher than the marginal benefit. That's how you can see that this is a bad decision. I don't pretend to. There was a time in my life when I used to smoke, and my wife reminds me at least once a year how dumb I was. Yeah, but it was a cool thing to do. But it was dumb. Why was it dumb? Because clearly the marginal cost, right, and the long-term healthcare implications clearly exceeded the marginal benefit of looking cool. Right? It was a dumb decision, but that's kind of what addictions are, right? In my case, it was just tobacco, right? But you know, look at any of the other things, right? Meth, opioids, alcohol, you know, horror, gaming. I don't know, like not throwing these all together, right? But being addicted to your cell phone. Addictions are irrational. And I know I'm not trying to be heartless by saying that because it's not rationality, right? There's lots of reasons why individuals become addicted to something, and it's not just because we haven't presented them the math. But addiction is a situation where the marginal cost exceed the marginal benefits. And it's not easy enough, unfortunately, because most of these things have um, right, there's a stimulus sent to your brain that makes you wanting to keep doing these things. Where addiction oftentimes looks like this. A different kind of problem exists. So here the problem is that you're doing it too much. Here, you're doing it too little. Like if I had stopped at the second piece of sushi, dude, I'm really hungry. I kind of want more, and my benefits exceed the cost. So I should be doing it more. So in this sense, I'm doing it too little, which is why economists generally suggest that you do things until the marginal benefit equals the marginal cost. Um, and then there's two different ways that economists then make statements about the world. There are positive statements and there are negative statements. And when we talk about things in terms of positive analysis, we're talking about the way that things are. So these are um, factual statements. It's either true or not. Normative is opinion. Now, what's really cool about this class and why I always like it is because we get to do both of these in this class. When you took Econ 131, certainly if you took it with me, we tended to just focus on the positive analysis. It's not my job to tell you how to think about the world, and it's not your job to have to learn how I think about the world. Econ 396 is a little bit different because now that we all have a general notion of what economics is in terms of the positive analysis, and that's kind of what we'll talk about in the lectures, is reviewing that positive analysis of that topic that we're talking about that week. We're then using that framework each and every week to then for each of us then to say what our own opinion is, our normative analysis. So this slide right here, slide 24, is a great description of what we're going to do in this class. Be aware of the positive analysis and be able to make a normative analysis. And that one of the things that we're going to continually see in this course is that you have to create an incentive structure. And it's with that incentive structure that we get people to do things that we want them to do. And much of this course, we'll talk about the good thing that people should do, and we'll talk about the incentive structure that exists to create those conditions. And then the other thing to kind of be aware of, and this will be my last slide that I'll talk about here, is one of the things that we have to always be careful about is that we separate the correlation of two variables with the causal relationship that may exist between two variables. Correlation just means that two variables are moving in the same direction. Causation means that one is causing the other one to move. We always want to remember and ask ourselves, are these variables moving because there's a causal relationship, or are they just two variables moving together? Okay. This is a little bit of a shorter lecture, so this is just kind of giving us a basic framework now to work with here in terms of understanding economics.